So, Jerry, I would like to speak first of all about your Kuangchi Program Service.
Mm-hmm.
How it came up and what are you doing exactly?
Guangchi Program Service started in 1958 in Taiwan, in Taipei. And originally it began as a radio studio, producing radio programs for broadcast in Taiwan. And it was so successful, especially the short radio dramas, that the founder, Philip Beret, a Jesuit from California, he decided to build a television production center. And at that time, it was very difficult to convince superiors to do that because there was no television studio in Taiwan. They hadn't begun television, but he knew that it was going to start, so he started the television production center. And by the time he was finished, the first television studio was in operation. So probably the very first Chinese television drama ever was produced by Guangchi Program Service. And at that time, of course, there were not a lot of TV studios, so the television producers made good use of our studios. And the function of Guangchi was really, at that time, was really to provide healthy entertainment, values, programming, and non-formal education for the Chinese audience. Because the Taiwanese at that time did not have that many schools. So education came from radio and television for many people. And I think that it was a good witness to the church's concern for the whole person in Taiwan.
Recently you have started to make films about Jesuit missionaries in China.
Yes.
What is the idea and the success of that?
Well, for many, many years, since the time of Mao Zedong and the communist government, there was impossible to broadcast anything in China about missionaries and very little about religion. So we tried for a long time to convince the television people in China to let us produce a documentary about Matteo Ricci, because Matteo Ricci, the Jesuit missionary, one of the first Jesuit missionaries in China, was one of the most successful and the most accepted by the Chinese, because he adapted, he was convinced that the Christian religion had to be adapted to Chinese culture. So he's accepted by the Chinese, but they said no. They said no, that's against the law. So we had to wait a few more years, and then we decided that we would produce a documentary about his good friend, a Chinese who became the general secretary to the emperor, Paul Guangchi. He was not a missionary, so he was acceptable, and Matteo Ricci would feature in his story, in the documentary. That was accepted. That was broadcast by Jiangsu Television in Nanjing, which just happens to be the city where Paul Guangchi and Matteo Ricci met in the year 1600. They considered that part of their history, so they broadcast that. And then it opened that year, it opened the Shanghai Film Festival, and then it was purchased by Central Chinese Television, which is the largest television network in the whole world, and broadcast multiple times on their channels throughout the country. So we followed that up by doing a program on the Jesuit astronomer, a mathematician astronomer, Adam Schall von Bell, the German, and now we're working on a documentary about the famous Italian Jesuit brother artist, Giuseppe Castiglione.
Yes, tell us something about that, because I found very interesting to work with Chinese on Giuseppe Castiglione.
Yes, well, we actually, Giuseppe Castiglione he was a Jesuit brother from Milan. He's probably, aside from Matteo Ricci, one of the most famous foreigners throughout China. And it's ironic that he's not that well known in Italy. We hope that will change. But the reason he's so famous is because he worked for 3 Chinese emperors in the Qing dynasty. He introduced color more color and more perspective, more depth and perspective into Chinese paintings. Of course, like all of the other missionaries, their goal was to protect the young and very fragile Catholic Church in China. And they did this by making friends with the emperors and by contributing their talents. And Castiglione came to China with that goal in mind, to work for the emperor, to befriend the emperor, to contribute to Chinese culture through art, and by doing so to protect the Catholic Church.
Is any connection between Castiglione and Year of the Horse? Because this year Chinese people, they are celebrating the Year of the Horse.
Exactly, yes. His most famous painting is 100 Horses. And of course the Manchu emperors, the Qing dynasty emperors, were originally, their horses were an important part of their culture. And they were fascinated by horses, they loved horses, and so one of his first commissions was the Yongzheng emperor, the second emperor that he worked for, asked him to make a painting of 100 of his horses. And it took him 4 years, over 4 years to do this. It was a long scroll painting, 7.7 meters long, and featured 100 horses all in different positions. This is no easy task because unlike oil painting, you cannot correct a mistake. What you paint is what's there forever. So if near the end of his painting, if he made a mistake, he would have to begin all over again. But the Yongzheng emperor saw this masterpiece and was convinced that that Castiglione should continue working in the court as court painter, and it really launched him into onto a whole new level of respect and integration into the Chinese empire at that time. So although they didn't, none of the emperors became Catholic because of the contribution of these missionaries, they were highly respected by the emperors, and the emperors realized that they had something to contribute to China.
Any project for the future?
In the future we have some ideas. Now we're also cooperating with an American production company on a documentary for American public television on Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit paleontologist who had a great influence on the Second Vatican Council, the document on the Church in the modern world. We don't know whether that will be of interest to China or not, but we're going to try to make a Chinese version. And after that, there's still another very famous Belgian Jesuit, Verbiest, Father Verbiest, who continued the work of Adam Schell. There's also a possibility of making a documentary about the 7,000 volumes of European learning that traveled to China on a boat with Adam Schell and some of the other missionaries that came. The Chinese call that the floating library, which had a great impact on Chinese education and culture.
So Jerry, thank you very much for this entertainment with us. I think it will be useful for our readers and for viewers.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.